Hey, folks, I hope you are doing well this Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. This is Jackie Lukman. How are you doing? One half of Lukman Nation. And listen, there's so much going on, and there usually is. I figured I would take a little bit of time and chat with you folks about a few of these things that are happening right now. So, listen, I hope that you are having a great day. I hope that those of you who are tuning in and watching are well. I hope you can hear me. Um, Hoping that the technology is working like it's supposed to. So, this is not going to be a very long chat we're going to have. I just want to go over a few things really quickly that I think are very, very interesting that I haven't had a chance to really get into the way I wanted to on other platforms because it's just really kind of complex to kind of point it out. So let's get into a couple of things. Obviously, the big, huge deal right now is the Georgia Senate runoffs. And give me a second while I complete a couple of things here. Trying to get used to some new technology. We're always trying to get used to some new technology, aren't we? All the time. It's just, there's always stuff that we are trying to do differently, better, new, so we can improve what's going on here in Lukman Nation. And yeah, I hope that works out well. Let's see, make sure we get everything going on here. Boop, put that over there. All right, so let's take a look at just what's going on in regard to the Georgia Senate runoff races, which pretty much are over. They haven't called one of them because it's too close to call still, but Raphael Warnock, Reverend Raphael Warnock, pastor of the famed Ebenezer Baptist Church in Georgia, has won his election against Trump supporting bigot WNBA basketball team owner and interim senator for Georgia, not anymore, Kelly Loeffler. And we still don't know about the race between Ossoff and Perdue right now. The tally is still with Ossoff at 50.2% and Perdue with 49.8%. Let me remove the pillow that I'm sitting on. That I think that makes it a little bit better. I sit so much. That's, basically what I do all the time, all day long. Very sedentary lifestyle of leisure, life of leisure I'm leading over here. So yeah, I'm not that tall. That's all there is of me. So the media outlets still haven't called the Ossoff-Perdue race, but it looks like Ossoff is going to win. The question is whether the margin of error will be large enough or small enough, rather, for Perdue to demand a recount, which under Georgia election law, a candidate can demand a recount if the race is within less than 5%, a half a percentage point, 0.5 percentage point. So we don't know what the final margin is in the Perdue Ossoff race, but for all intents and purposes, the Democrats did pick up, or it looks like they will pick up, the desperately needed 2 seats in the Senate to basically give control of the Senate to the Democrats, even though these 2 seats alone would give the Senate a 50-50 split. Vice President Kamala Harris, who was promoted from senator to vice president, she would become the tie-breaking vote in the Senate for the Democrats. So, yeah, so electorally, politically, this is a win for the Democrats, and it's a win that they couldn't afford to miss. This was a benchmark that I think the Democrats could not afford to miss. Um, and I think that because the elections were so close, here's the first thing I'm going to say that's going to make a lot of people angry. I think the Democrats still missed the mark as a party, as a platform of ideas, as an ideology, and really as a direction that is an alternative to the Republicans. Because the margin of victory for the Democrats in these two Senate races in Georgia was so close, they didn't win these races by a mandate. It's not like people, said, yes, we must have the Democrats as opposed to the Republicans. No, these races were far closer than they should have been for the Democrats, I think, to really celebrate their wins based on their platform and a mandate. These races that the Democrats won were won for two reasons. Number one, because enough people in Georgia were tired of Trumpism and didn't want to extend Trumpism in the Senate any further with Loeffler and Perdue. Just enough people, and that just enough people was propelled by grassroots Black, Latinx, or Chicano. I have to work myself out of saying that. Black, Chicano, indigenous folk, working class, poor white people. The people that didn't, this was not like a mandate that liberal white America put forth in electing these two people. This was really on the backs and on the work of the most marginalized groups of people in the state of Georgia, pitting, working up against the Trump faction in Georgia, the white folks in Georgia, who some of whom are poor, some of whom are working class, and probably a few Black folks and Chicanos who didn't have a problem with Trump's racism, didn't have a problem with his sexism or his xenophobia or his horrible policies or anything like that. They just don't want their America to change from the power being in the hands of white people with backward ideas. That's really, they just don't want their America to change, even if they actually get nothing material in keeping their America the way it is, because with the lack of progress toward equality for all people, these people still stay poor, right? They still stay without Medicare themselves, adequate medical coverage themselves. They still stay without adequate affordable housing. College tuition is still out of reach for most of them. So by keeping America, their America, wherever in whatever way they think it is, they actually gain nothing materially. It's all in their warm, fuzzy feeling about, flag, eagle, patriotism, that kind of garbage about America. They don't get anything from that. And that is something that, well, I think I'm beyond the point of trying to convince people who have invested all of their political activity or the culmination of their political possibilities into being satisfied with symbolism of what they think America is without getting anything of benefit to themselves and their families from that. And that's where I think those people are. I think they're happy with that, and I'm happy to leave them with that. That being said, I don't want people to get the idea that the Democrats having control of the Senate is going to change anything all that drastically as far as moving us toward the progress politically that we need. And I address this some in my monologue today for the show, By Any Means Necessary. But I want to talk about that a little bit further, because I think while I want to be very, very clear, I have a whole hell of a lot of respect, mad crazy respect for the people I personally know who are and have been on the ground in Georgia doing the grassroots work of knocking on doors, educating people on policy, talking to people about the issues that are important to them and their communities, getting these candidates to talk to these people and hear what these people want from them, and making commitments to people. Okay, this is what I will take to Washington and on your behalf if you vote for me. Having that quid pro quo transactional conversation with voters and the candidates who need those people's votes, because that's what politics needs to be. You understand? That's what politics is. Let me correct that. Politics is transactional. It is supposed to be, because that's the way the system is set up. Candidates want us to vote for them so that they can get a job in Washington and go and legislate on behalf of the people who vote for them. That is the way we're told that it's supposed to work. We understand that at this point, corporations are controlling and basically writing much of the legislation that gets passed in Congress. But this transactional relationship between politicians and their constituents, their constituencies, needs to be revamped. And I think that I like I said, I have a lot of respect for the folks on the ground, the Anoa Shangas, the Stacey Hopkins, the Mondale Robinsons, and I've got to give Mondale his props for the Black Male Voter Project. Regardless of what anybody thinks about electoral politics, I am very, very respectful of the work that Mondale is doing in organizing, mobilizing, talking to, having conversations with Black men, while everybody else in the world is propping up Black women, as if Black men are non-existent, as if Black men don't have issues that need to be spoken to and addressed and advocated for, and as if Black men don't vote just as much as Black women do. This weird thing that people do with demonizing Black men when Black men show up in polls where, they'll say 98% of Black women voted for a candidate, and then they'll say, but Black men, only 95% of Black men voted. What? Seriously, you're gonna bitch about 3%? Oh, only 89% of Black men. That kind of discourse where all Black men are demonized because a small percentage of Black men didn't vote at the same level of Black women. It's been so disingenuous and destructive and harmful, and it's intentional. It's absolutely intentional. The propensity by, and I'm talking about Democrats, to erase an entire half of a constituency, men, Black men. It's entirely intentional. And it is something that I think we need to be much more aware of is happening and push back on it, because, as I said, Mondale Robinson and brothers like him are doing the work, and Black men are indeed engaged in the electoral process much more vocally now because of this work to be done. So I have a lot of respect for these people, because they walk what they talk. They practice what they preach. They believe in grassroots mobilization and education and that kind of thing. And they go out and they do the work. They're not, on social media just talking and, telling folks what to do. They're actually going out there doing the work and affecting the kind of change that they want to see. And I have a lot of respect for these people for another reason too, because a lot of these folks are the same people who are also doing the same kind of work to push Medicare for all, to push the cancellation of student loan debt, to push canceling the rent during during a pandemic, to push not just a $2,000 stimulus check, but monthly relief from the government, which owes us because it's our money. These are the same people who, yes, they're advocating for people to get involved in the electoral process, which your host is just like, okay, if that's what you want to still do, that's fine. But they're also doing a lot of work outside of the electoral process arena to educate people on issues that are not. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I have a lot of respect for people who are on the ground doing the work. Those are the people who won this election. And I said it in regard to the general election, and I'm saying it again in regard to the Georgia elections. These folks dragged these people across this finish line to win them these seats in Georgia. And I absolutely believe that's true. I don't believe that the Democratic candidates winning this election was a mandate on the appeal or the popularity of the Democratic Party's platform or priorities. I believe that this election is the manifestation of that grassroots work where people in states, in cities, and counties can get excited about candidates because the candidates either have done stuff for people to get excited about, or they've had conversations with them. They've done the work. The grassroots activists have done the work to foster these conversations, have these communications, and people feel like, all right, I'm going to buy into this deal with you. I'm going to vote for you because you said you're going to do this for me. And I think that's what has happened here in this Georgia Senate, these two Georgia Senate races. And I think that poses problems for the Democrats. But I think that also reflects the problem with electoral politics affecting the kind of widespread massive change that we need in the first place. Not to say that there is no place for electoral politics in change that needs to happen, of course. But here's the thing. Let me, like I said on the show, it's great that Raphael Warnock is the first Black senator from Georgia, but it's also shitty that Raphael Warnock is the first Black senator from Georgia, because why is he the first? Do you understand what I'm saying? It's 2021. And I get it's absolutely true that it wasn't that long ago when Black folks in Georgia couldn't vote. We're talking less than 100 years ago. I think it's less than 80 years where, Raphael Warnock's mother remembers the time when she could not vote. Do you understand? Where when her mother, his grandmother couldn't vote, his grandfather couldn't vote. So it wasn't that long ago where Black people were completely disenfranchised and left out of the electoral process in Georgia and across this country. But, people are always talking about how they believe in America, and Warnock himself said this. And I get that's the political thing to say, and maybe he actually does believe in America. I don't know. I mean, okay. But I have a difficult time believing in the concept of a country in which we have a media that is making a hero out of the Secretary of State of Georgia, who was appointed to his position because of the voter disenfranchisement and voter suppression campaign 8 years long of the former Secretary of State, who is the governor of the state because he almost literally stole an election from Stacey Abrams. And that was not raised by Warnock, as much as I think I would have liked to have seen him do it. Wasn't raised as much by Ossoff, and it sure as hell wasn't raised by the Democratic Party on a national level. So while we've got the media now making people like Brad Raffensperger, who is the current Secretary of State of Georgia, a hero because he is challenging Trump on his crazy pants claim about the presidential election being stolen, the same media doesn't point out the fact that Raffensperger not only was appointed to his position because of Brian voter suppression Kemp, but he also continued to carry out the campaign of voter suppression against largely Black and Chicano voters in Georgia. So you have a Democratic candidate who represents a great historical feat, but who is also diminishing the continued challenges that the Republican governor and the Republican Secretary of State continue to impose upon people to vote. Because the Democratic Party is like, yeah, don't say too much about that because we need white people to vote for you. That's what all that is. But also still expressing this hope in this concept of this country that plays politics in this way, where you have blatant efforts on the part of the Republicans to deny mostly Black people the right to vote. And then you have the Democrats coming along saying, yeah, I know, but don't make such a big deal about that because, we need white people to vote for you. We don't want those white people to be turned off because we want some of those white people who voted for Kemp and were fine with Raffensperger and were okay with denying Black people the right to vote. We want some of those people to vote for you so that our party can win 2 seats in the Senate. I hope I'm making sense. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like if your idea of America, if that's what you want to, that's where we want to go. If your idea of America is hinged upon a 2-party political system in which those are the 2 parties in this system, then I don't believe in an America in which those are the 2 choices that we have for political parties. The party that is going to actively wage a campaign to keep certain people from voting so that they can win. And then on the other hand, the party that's not going to make such a big deal about that because they want to win with some of the votes from the people who voted for the first party. That's crazy, but that's kind of the reality that we face. It's not kind of the reality, it is the reality that we face with the Democrats and the Republicans. The other reality that we face with this win for the Democrats in the Senate is that, yeah, people are talking about, well, now Biden will, most certainly get the $2,000 stimulus relief check bill passed. Yeah, that's probably true, but it's still going to be one check. It's only going to be one check. One $2,000 check. And excuse me. While that's not at all, nothing, it's also not the kind of relief that we need. And we know that the Biden administration and the Democratic Party is going to make a big, huge deal about, we got you $2,000, while people are still going to be evicted, facing this eviction crisis when the the extended moratorium on evictions runs out at the end of this month, I think, because the Democrats are not going to make any kind of legislative effort to cancel anybody's rent. They're not going to provide regular, consistent financial support to us so that we can pay our bills and pay our mortgage and pay our rent and buy food for the extended period of time that this pandemic is going to be affecting us, because half the country doesn't believe in wearing masks because Donald Trump told them not to. And the CDC kind of screwed up their guidance in the beginning too. Let's be clear on that. And because the government did not provide for people to be able to adhere to these statewide mask requirements and lockdown requirements and such. So you make a requirement for people to do whatever in order to not spread this virus, but you don't provide any means for them to adhere to the requirement. If that requirement means that people are going to have to purchase materials in order to meet that requirement. How are they going to do that if they don't have any money, if they don't have money? And this is the crazy situation that the Democrats were in, because even though Trump in his ridiculous, emboldening the anti-lockdown people, the reasons they did it were ridiculous. There was a strain of, well, what else are you going to do if the government is not going to provide relief for people? How can you say you're going to close businesses when going to work is the only way people can get money in order to pay their rent, pay their bills, buy food? The government didn't step in and provide any of that support that was taken away when society had to be shut down, as it should have been. So all of the focus on the fallout from this pandemic, people have put the focus on, well, people aren't wearing masks. And yes, people should wear masks, absolutely. And, well, people aren't doing this, and it's individual things that, but no, the issue was always that the government refused to provide the material support that we needed to endure the lockdown that needed to happen to keep us from spreading the virus. Other countries have done that, where they have, yes, absolutely, closed society, closed businesses, ordered everyone to stay at home, but they also sent people money, medicine, and food, made sure that people were all right, were able to survive during the pandemic. This government didn't do that. The Trump administration didn't do that, and the Democrats didn't demand that it be done. So the situation we're faced with this new Senate majority is, yeah, we'll get a $2,000 check, but not another of the issues that we have experienced that have been made worse because of the way the government didn't respond to this pandemic. None of those issues are going to be addressed. So people will still be kicked out of their homes on February 1. Those eviction proceedings will ramp right back up, and people will be kicked out of their homes. People will go right back to being buried under crushing student loan debt. People will go right back to being shot to death by the police. We just saw that Jacob Blake's, the cop who shot Jacob Blake, he won't be charged. I think this was in Wisconsin. He won't be charged. These things are not going to change for us. These pressing issues of inequality and injustice and economic and racial oppression and gender oppression, these things are not going to be solved because there is a Democratic majority in the Senate. Why not? Well, because I think the easiest thing to do is to look at what Raphael Warnock had to do in order to get the blessings of the Democratic Party. He had to walk back his support for the Palestinian people, for their freedom, in order not to be branded an anti-Semite by the pro-Zionist faction of the Democratic Party, which is the Democratic Party, basically. So here we have a man who is the supposedly progressive-ish pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, historic church where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used to preach, and who understands the history, the actual history, not the made-up shit that comes from the U.S. State Department and Israel about the Palestinian people and their land, and the truth about the creation of the nation state of Israel and the occupation of Palestine by Israel, and the oppression of those people and the genocide that the government of Israel is committing against them. And he's a pastor who understands that our Christian faith commands us to fight for justice on behalf of the oppressed, and specifically against empire. That's not like a subtle thing in the teachings of the gospel of Jesus Christ. If you read just the teachings of Jesus Christ, you will see the anti-imperialism throughout everything he does and says, and even throughout his own crucifixion. But that's a whole nother discussion that I know y'all don't want to get into right now. But he understands this. And we're talking about, he's the pastor of Martin Luther King Jr.'s church. And Martin Luther King Jr. was definitely anti-imperialist. But in order to get a share of that $833 million combined from both parties that was spent on this election, the Democratic Party told him, oh, no, you cannot stand up for the Palestinian people. And you can't say that they're oppressed, because then you're saying mean things about Israel, and you can't say mean things about Israel. Otherwise, if you do, you're an anti-Semite, and we're not going to support you if you take that kind of stand. So Warnock had to walk back his comments about supporting Israel. Given that kind of pressure, running for the office, just running for the seat to win the election, how likely do you think it is that he is not going to have to continue to bow to that kind of pressure when he's in the Senate? And the same thing with Ossoff. I don't know what his views are, because I don't like him anyway. But you know, what I'm talking about this from the perspective of the Black people who, once again, because people are all on this thing celebrating Black folks saving y'all asses again and saving the country and democracy and the Senate and the American government, and Black folks probably saved the world. Well, if we saved y'all so many times, what exactly are we going to get this time around? Because we've seen from Biden's administration that all we're going to get is more imperialism. And make no mistake, I feel like this people being excited that the HEROES Act could get passed now with this $2,000 relief payment, that's like a win. But if that is the only thing we're going to get, and everything else we're going to get is going to be more of the same domestically and more of the same internationally. I mean, I'm wondering, are Warnock and Ossoff going to vote for continued sanctions on Zimbabwe? Are they going to vote for continued sanctions on Iran, on China, on Venezuela, Cuba? Are they going to continue to vote for U.S. Regime change in Brazil, Colombia, in Nicaragua? I mean, we have to ask what it is we are getting in regard to domestic and foreign policy, even under a Democratic majority, because people's lives are still at stake. When you understand that the Democratic agenda in regard to foreign policy in particular is really no different from the Republican agenda, then you begin to understand that the Department of Defense is not going to get any less money next time around just because the Senate is now controlled by the Democrats. When you understand that the Democratic foreign policy agenda is just like the Republicans, you will understand that the 1033 program that funnels military weapons to state, local, college campus, and even public school police forces, that's not going anywhere. That's not going anywhere under the Democrats. The whole conversation about defund the police, whatever way you want to frame it, the Democrats aren't going to entertain that. Because we've seen that Joe Biden himself has said he doesn't want to defund the police. He wants to give the police more money. So if the Democrats are not going to have a conversation about defunding the police or community control over the police, which is really what it needs to be, then you know that there's not going to be a conversation that is going to be had about qualified immunity and taking that power away from police unions. It is a terrible habit that we have gotten ourselves into, I think, in hitching our wagon to electoral politics and solely to electoral politics, and believing that a win for a political party equates to a win for Black people. And, Chicanos, indigenous people, that is not, I think that is absolutely false, because these political parties and the people who are elected into them, they don't exist to govern for the people anymore. I don't know, maybe there was a time when they did, but I know that those people, by and large, weren't us. So what do we do? And here's another thing that I think is really important, that I wanna show you. I want to try to show you. And this is the other problem with celebrating the Democrats winning these 2 seats in the Senate. Because when we do that, I think we ignore the obvious problems with the Democratic Party, because we think that we've gotten rid of the quote unquote bad guys, which are the Republicans. And it's really kind of messy when, as bad as the Republican Party is, especially the Trump wing of the Republican Party, as bad as they are, it's really kind of a mess when they actually make a point about the Democrats that you can't ignore and that you can't dispute just because it comes from the Republicans. But the Democrats, they do ignore it and they will dispute it, because they don't ever want to be held accountable by us for this truth that they don't want to be addressed. Let me show you what I mean. Let me try to show you what I mean here. So this is, I actually do at least read articles on Fox News, because I cannot watch Fox News. I can't listen to these people talk. The sound of their voice, it nauseates me. But every once in a while, I will go and read a couple of articles from Fox News just to see what they have to say. And this is from one of the worst of them, Tucker Carlson, where he says, forget Trump phone call. Here's what really matters about Georgia Senate runoffs. And he says a lot of, crazy, ridiculous, typical right-wing, racist, typical Tucker Carlson, silly pants stuff in here. Let's see, downplaying how important this phone call was that Trump made to Raffensperger and the threats that he made. And, Carlson says this wasn't a big deal. Well, actually, it was a big deal. And legally, I don't know if there's any kind of legal thing that can come out of this call, but it really was a big deal that the president of the United States called the Secretary of State of a state and said, you better find me some votes to overturn an election that was recounted 3 times in that state, in Georgia, and certified as being devoid of any kind of fraud. So yeah, that was kind of a big deal. So that wasn't surprising that Tucker Carlson, downplayed that. But here's what he said that was very, very interesting. And it starts here. He said, here's one question. How exactly did Joe Biden win more votes than any other presidential candidate in the history of the United States? After 50 years of uninterrupted mediocrity, it was Washington and 2 spectacularly unsuccessful presidential campaigns in which he was rejected resolutely by Democratic primary voters. Did Americans suddenly decide they wanted to be led by Joe Biden? So then he says, no, that's not what happened. And here is where the truth is really quite painful. What happened was the people in charge rigged the game. Joe Biden got his party's nomination for one reason, because Bernie Sanders turned out to be more popular than anyone expected him to be. Sanders was an actual threat to the Democratic establishment. He talked about changing tax rates, so they crushed him. Out of nowhere, CNN told us that Sanders was violent, sexist, a danger to women everywhere, even a Russian asset. Tucker Carlson wrote this. This came out of the mind of Tucker fucking Carlson. And I don't see the lie anywhere in it. He goes on to say, within days, Bernie Sanders melted away and Joe Biden got the job. No one expected that, least of all Biden. Once he was chosen, virtually every power center on the earth joined the cause. Big business, Wall Street, the defense establishment, big pharma, the permanent bureaucracy in Washington, and above all, Silicon Valley, worked tirelessly from the day Biden got the nomination until election day to bypass voters and get him to the White House. Now, of course, the part about voters being bypassed and getting Biden to the White House is not accurate, because people really did vote for Joseph Biden. Even if it was just because they wanted to get rid of Donald Trump, it is still true that more people in this country, 73 or 76 million people in this country voted for Joseph Biden, whereas around 70 million voted for Donald Trump. So no, these people didn't actually bypass voters. People actually voted for him. But it is true that there were noted changes in Google's algorithm, where you didn't see a whole lot or as much traffic criticizing Joe Biden. Same thing on Facebook and Twitter. So, is this untrue just because Tucker Carlson said it? And I don't think it is. It's obviously not. It is the truth. This is what happened. We absolutely do know, folks, that the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, oh, there's your chats. There's your chat. The Democratic Party did indeed scuttle the campaign of Bernie Sanders, not just in this election, but in the last one. An entire movement online and in grassroots, on the ground activism grew bigger because the Democratic Party scuttled the 2016 campaign of Bernie Sanders. We've talked about this for 4 years, that the Democratic Party rigged the election, the primary against Bernie Sanders. Is that not true because Tucker Carlson said it? Of course it's true. We know it's true. They did the same thing, although in a different way, this time around. Is that not true because Tucker Carlson said it? Of course it's true. Of course it's true that the Democratic Party rigged the primaries against Bernie Sanders, and they absolutely did. And the media colluded with them to propagate all these lies about Sanders. He's a sexist, he's violent, he's a danger to women. Yes, they did. Remember that debate where Elizabeth Warren comes out and claims that Sanders told her in a private conversation that a woman would never be president. And what did the media do? They ran with that and they smeared Sanders for being a sexist. Yes, they did do that. Here is the problem that the Democratic Party has. Because, see, we remember these things. We should. We had better. Because it's a real problem when the Republicans remember it and use it as evidence to support Trump's bogus claims of the election being stolen from him, because that's what this is. But the Democratic Party will not allow any discussion of any of this to happen within their party so that they can do better by us, the people who they demand vote for them so that we can all get rid of Trump and people like Tucker Carlson and all that kind of stuff. That's the really fucked up situation that the Democratic Party is in. And can I be really honest? That's the fucked up situation that we've allowed them to be in. Because, see, we haven't brought this stuff up. I remember when South Carolina went for Joe Biden And then there was a whole bunch of folks talking about, okay, now we need to stop talking about Sanders and rigged primaries, and Sanders isn't the nominee. Now we need to get behind Joe Biden. Okay, so he can win, and we can get rid of Trump. Okay, you've got that now. So now that you've got that, let me ask you, now that you have gotten rid of Trump, let me ask you what y'all gonna do about this. What's the Democratic Party that you threw all your weight and your support behind going to do about not having this happen ever again? What's Joseph Biden going to do about changing some rules for Democratic primaries? And I don't understand how we can be scoffing at Republicans for their it is some crazy pants, and it's also racist, because the states and the counties in particular that Trump and his cabal of racists are targeting are mostly Black, mostly urban precincts. They're the ones that they claim they stole all his ballots. As much as their claims of election fraud and the election was stolen from Donald Trump are absolutely bogus, I don't understand how Democrats can look at Trump supporters and point fingers and laugh when the Democratic Party sued in 2 or 3 states to kick the Green Party off of the ballots in the general election, and won in 2 of those states. I don't think I can understate how important it is for those grassroots activists who did so much work to make Georgia happen. I cannot state how important it is for folks to not take your foot off the gas and turn that energy right back toward the Democratic Party so they can address this shit that they've done to their own voters. Now, I'm just talking to folks who are still invested in this electoral process, because I'm not one of those people. I think I'm just going to be honest. I think Barack Obama broke me. I think he did. And I think it's a good thing that he did. But we've all got to come to the realization that we've got to do a whole lot more work outside of electoral politics than we do inside of the process. But we've all got to get there at a different, we've all got to get there whenever we do, however we do. And I'm hoping that this election, where now the Democratic Party controls the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. Now, when your economic and financial and health situations, your access to healthcare, your access to affordable housing, your access to affordable higher education, when your access to quality publicly funded public education, primary education, when none of that changes, when you don't have better jobs that pay better wages so that you can take care of yourself and your family on the salary of one job instead of having to work 2 or 3, string a few of them together so you can afford rent. When none of that changes for you 2 years into the Biden administration, tell me what you're going to do about it. What are you going to do about it? You're going to look for the next person to elect, or are you going to get connected to an organization in your area that can help you get some real serious political education on some real serious radical solutions to these problems that do exist? They're just not applied here in this country, because this country is a capitalist, imperialist country and does not want to implement those solutions, because it would mean the end of capitalism in this country. And it would mean the end of imperialism around the world. So at the root, at the crux of the answer to our problems is the dismantling of the capitalist imperialist system in this country. And neither political party wants that to happen. As much as the Republicans talk about any Democratic candidate now being a socialist, Democrats will be quick to tell you, we're not socialists. None of them want to give up capitalism because none of them want to give up their wealth and share it with us. That is just the truth. And I'm not saying that Raphael Warnock is a bad person. I don't know the man. I'm just talking about politics. This is the other thing we need to get away from. I am so completely unconcerned with how nice or decent or sweet or God-fearing or polite or pleasant or how much fun someone is to have if you're going to, sit down and have a beer with them. These people, I don't want them in my house. That's not why I know who they are. I know who they are because they have decided to take on a job that is supposed to mean being the representative of the people who live in their district, who they want to vote for them so that they can go and represent the interests of those people in the halls of power in Washington, D.C. That's why I know who they are. So I don't care that I don't, it's not important to me that Raphael Warnock is probably a nice guy who loves dogs. Wonderful. But I want to know how he's going to vote on sanctions against Zimbabwe and Venezuela and Iran. I want to know if he is going to vote to cut or end aid to Israel. Same thing with Jon Ossoff, who I know how he's going to vote. So if we don't have a framework for steps to challenging and dismantling capitalism and imperialism in the political demands that we put to these politicians who are asking for our vote, then all we're going to continue to get is more polite capitalism and imperialism. And we will continue to get absolutely nothing. We'll get crumbs. And that's what we will get in exchange for the continued death and destruction that is carried out in our name around the world. And we have to stop wanting that. We have to stop being okay with that. And I'm hearing part of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech to Riverside Church, I think Beyond Vietnam. Also, where do we go from here? We have to be, I hate to feel like I'm raining on people's parades, because people did a lot of work to make what happened in Georgia happen. I know that, like I said at the top of the segment, people who I know personally, Mondale Robinson and Anoa Changa and Stacey Hopkins, fucking tireless, doing incredible, tireless work, getting people educated and engaged and having conversations with these candidates and getting these candidates together with people and getting people's issues in front of these candidates and trying to broker some kind of agreement so that, maybe we can affect some change with this group of folks. My question to people is just, and not those grassroots activists. I'm not asking those people because I know what their answers are. Because see, I talk to them. I'm in a little bit of a community with them, so I understand where their heads are at. Because, like I said, they're the ones who are also advocating for some of these other things that we are talking about. I'm talking about. My question is to the people who are celebrating, who to the voters, especially Black, Chicano, Indigenous voters who put Warnock and now pretty much Ossoff into the Senate. If and when they don't change anything for you and the rest of us in this country, what is your plan? What are you going to do? that's I think where I am in this whole electoral process. As right now, just less than 10 miles from where I sit, thousands of modern day Klan members who call themselves Trump supporters, some of them, and I know that, people are like, oh, they're not all racist. Listen, um, I'm tired of making excuses for people who were fine with every racist, hateful, xenophobic thing that came out of this man's mouth over the past 4 years, and they still voted for him. You don't have to call them racist. I'll do it for you, because that's what they are. Just 10 miles from here, they're rallying, waiting for this, count of the Electoral College votes that's going to end in Biden being declared president. It doesn't matter how much the Republicans challenge it. There's no overturning any of this. There was no electoral fraud. The election wasn't stolen from Trump. People really just voted quite literally for the lesser of two evils this time. And again, as I close, I cannot help but ask folks, now that you've got the lesser evil, what are you going to do when the lesser evil starts to do evil shit too? Because that's where I think we are. And I think we have to be prepared to challenge Biden, just like we're prepared to challenge Trump. And I laugh even as I realize all of these folks who were so intent on challenging Trump, they're not down there opposing these folks. But, that's a whole nother conversation. But there absolutely needs to be something done within the Democratic Party, pushed by the Democratic voters, about the voter suppression that the Democrats commit in the primaries, that they have committed in the primaries to disappear the very successful and very popular campaign of Bernie Sanders. And in doing so, they silenced a large segment of their voter base, of their potential voter base, because them doing that turned off a lot of voters who could have come into the party. And then if that had happened, then this election would have been a mandate. Warnock and Ossoff would have been able to win this election, these runoff elections, with a much wider margin than they did had the Democratic Party not committed the voter suppression that they did and the fraudulent actions that they did in scuttling the campaign of Bernie Sanders and disenfranchising all those progressive voters. All of those Republicans who won in state and local elections, who won re-election to Congress, to the House and the Senate. Even as Joseph Biden won the presidential election, that's absolutely how you know that that this election was not about a mandate from the Democratic Party. It really was about Donald Trump. Because if people were so in love with the Democratic Party, then more Democratic challengers would have defeated Republican incumbents and Republican challengers. But that's not what happened. So the Democratic Party doesn't have a mandate here. Even though they control the House, even though they now control the Senate, they don't have a mandate that the people really love. They are a stopgap from more Trumpism at the executive level. But make no mistake, we will continue to get the same neoliberal, austerity approaching, centrist, corporate-friendly, warmongering, imperialist policies that we got under Trump, that we got under Obama, that we got under Bush, that we got under Clinton. Do you see what I'm saying? It doesn't matter who is the spokesperson or the mascot for the empire. It doesn't matter which party represents the empire. The empire remains the same. So at some point, we have to deal with challenging the empire and not just putting figureheads into the open seats in the empire, hoping that they're going to all by themselves turn the Titanic around. No, we're going to have to do something outside of what goes on 10 miles, less than 10 miles away from here on Capitol Hill. And we have to start doing it now. So join an organization, get involved in political education, understand imperialism and how it affects you domestically. And I'm going to start those conversations. The first one of those conversations is going to happen tonight at 7 p.m. with our friend and comrade Danny Haifong. And we are going to talk about China, imperialism and China and all the lies, or at least some of them, at least, the ones we can cover in an hour, behind all of the anti-China rhetoric in this new Cold War against China, and the truth behind most of the lies that you were told. So thanks for joining me. Do the thing, do the revolution thing, do the revolutionary thing. Join in our organization, political education, learn about imperialism, get into internationalism, and look, be really good to each other, y'all. And as always, as Fred Hampton said, peace if you're willing to fight for it. Talk to y'all soon. See you at 7.